You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Moser. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, 25th of November. An Indonesian asylum seeker on Interpol's most wanted list is in the UK. Asylum seeker children now aged 16 to return home next year. Second Euro dispatch from Nick Griffin. Syria is facing a deadline today from the Arab League. And Egypt's Tahrir Square is occupied with military on one side and the protesters on the other. UK news. Benny Wenger, an Indonesian asylum seeker who was granted UK citizenship for himself, his wife and 6 children, has been arrested in Oxford. This Indonesian is on Interpol's most wanted list and is wanted in his home country by authorities there for an alleged attack on a police station. Interpol issued a red notice after Indonesian authorities discovered his whereabouts. Apparently the red notice has the power to extradite anyone on Interpol's most wanted in any of its 190 country associates worldwide. The Indonesian authorities have said that Mr Wenger was part of a criminal organisation and is wanted on murder and arson charges. He is also wanted for an attack on a police station where they committed murder and destroyed the building by a firebomb, Indonesian cultural members have said. A British National Party spokesperson has commented, Mr Wenger is being supported in Britain by a man named Jago Russell, the chief executive of Fair Trials International, but at whose expense? Asylum seeker children now aged 16 to return home next year. Children from the unnecessary war in Afghanistan and who are now teenagers are to be repatriated back to Afghanistan. The strain on the economy that has been stretched by such a ridiculous idea of taking children from their homeland in the first place to repatriate them later was a waste of British taxpayers' money. Do-gooders in government have criticised the move, saying that these teenagers will be sent into a war-torn country, putting them in danger. But one nationalist spokesman returned the question with, if we hadn't gone into this war in Afghanistan in the first place, their homeland would probably be safe now as it ever was. Over 500 asylum Afghan child applicants who were not with adults have been refused citizenship in the UK, but they have been ignored with the casual liberal attitude of leave to remain here. Euro news. From the belly of the beast. Nick Griffin reports on the latest from Brussels. The euro crisis deepens by the day. The pro-union MEPs in Parliament are looking more and more like frightened rabbits, caught in the headlights of the juggernaut of reality. What does it mean for us in Britain? Well, thanks to successive Tory and Labour governments tying us more and more closely to the EU, Britain is going to get dragged down a long way in the undertow as the Eurozone either shrinks or breaks up altogether. That's now inevitable, because the Europhiles' remaining choices are all as bad as each other. Kick out Greece and then Portugal, Ireland, Italy and Spain and turn the surviving shrunken Eurozone into a German-run protectorate. Or get Germany to leave the Euro. Or force Germany to turn on the printing presses, leading to hyperinflation and a trade war with China. There is no sensible answer, for the simple reason that the whole Euro question was a ridiculous and unworkable utopian political fantasy in the first place. So, in all probability, the Europhiles will continue to put off any real decision and to fiddle while Rome, and several other capital cities, burn. All of which, thanks to among others Ted Heath, Maggie Thatcher, Tony Blair and David Cameron, means that Britain is being sucked down along with the rest. The nationalist answer is simple. When tied to a sinking ship, it's time to cut the rope and swim free. In the meantime, here's a piece of deeply practical advice. If you've got money in a genuinely British-based bank or building society, it's backed by a guarantee and is still reasonably safe. But if it's in a foreign-owned operation like the Dutch ING or Spanish Santander, get out. It's not yet clear which European banks will go down the tubes, but as the thing unravels further, it is inevitable that some will, and people's hard-earned savings too. So don't take any risks, move it or lose it. World news. Syria is facing a deadline today from the Arab League over signing the acceptance of monitors from the Arab League into its country. If the Arab League doesn't get its way with Syria, it is said it will place sanctions against the country by stopping air traffic into Syria, curbing its trade, and also threatening to halt any deals with the central bank. Early in November, a deal was struck with the Arab League to remove all military from the cities and built-up areas of Syria. Since that deal, there have been hundreds of so-called protesters killed in clashes by civilians and the Syrian government troops. Egypt's Tahrir Square is occupied with military on one side and the protesters on the other. The military have put up a huge concrete blockade across the square, dividing the two sides. The protesters, who have vowed not to leave until military rule is handed down, have made camp in Tahrir Square as the standoff continues. The Muslim Brotherhoods, who are set to gain from the early elections, have asked for a 1 million-man march today. Egypt's military leaders have said that what goes on in Tahrir Square does not apply to the rest of the country. The military also stated that after the elections they will be holding on to power. "We will not relinquish our power to a slogan-chanting mob," one military ruler has said. 38 people have been killed and 2,000 injured so far this week. One military advisor said that this was the reason why the concrete blockade was put up, to stop the clashes between the protesters and the military. 5 protesters have been killed in Yemen. The country that was on the edge of financial collapse has become yet another Middle Eastern country involved in protests. The 5 men who died were supporting the president's regime. Yemen is said to be one of the Middle East's poorest countries and also to be the breeding ground for Al-Qaeda. Thought for the day, a small thought for the weekend. Where in this day and age have all the protesters come from? You have to wonder when one small protest inflames the Middle East and spreads outwards like a rather nasty fundamentalist rash. Because whether we acknowledge the fact or not, for the most part all of these protests are from Muslim fundamentalists who want to see any reference to Western democracy and military enforcement handed over to the mullahs. These people, who have been helped with European and US military aid and heavily biased reporting, want to install Sharia law in those countries. The dictators that ruled them for many years kept these forces at bay in a way that the Muslim world understands and respects: brute force and ignorance. Now the Western world has opened the door. What will come out? And finally, a fisherman named Carlos Rafael netted an 880-pound blue tuna fish as he dropped the net from his fishing boat. The massive tuna fish is said to be worth over £250,000, as it is a sought-after meal in expensive restaurants in the Far East. As soon as he reached port, however, the US fisheries confiscated the rare, expensive fish. He claimed that he had caught the fish fairly, without a reel and harpoon, and he also held a fishing licence to fish for tuna. He explained to the authorities that he didn't try to hide the monster fish, but they took it anyway. Mr. Raphael is now said to be wondering if he should hand his tuna fishing licence in to the authorities. The US fisheries have said they are going to sell the fish and give it to the same fund that is set aside for all fishing fines. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar, and I wish all nationalists a very safe and a very happy weekend.
The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.